In 2015, Liverpool were broken. No identity, no trophies, no Champions League football. They were a sleeping giant, forgotten by Europe. But just a few years later, they were on top of the world, champions of Europe, kings of England. And it wasn't just Klopp. It wasn't just tactics. It was a trio, an African warrior, a pharaoh, and a Brazilian genius that brought Liverpool back from the dead. But how did three players from such different worlds form one of the deadliest front threes in football history? And why did it fall apart so suddenly? In 2010, Liverpool were no longer a giant. Once the most decorated club in English football, Liverpool had become a shadow of themselves. By 2014, Steven Gerrard was nearing the end. Carragher had already retired. Torres and Reina were long gone. What was left was a team stuck in an identity crisis, and things were about to get worse. After a miraculous 2013-14 campaign where Liverpool almost won the league under Brendan Rodgers, led by Luis Suarez's amazing campaign, the dream crumbled in one of the most tragic title collapses in Premier League history. Gerrard slipped, and just like that, the Premier League slipped through their fingers, creating a scar Liverpool couldn't shake off. Then came the exodus. Luis Suarez left for Barcelona. Daniel Sturridge became injury-prone. The replacements? Ricky Lambert, Mario Balotelli, Lazar Makovic. A club once feared across Europe was now a punchline. The football, predictable. The transfers, panic-driven. The management, underwhelmed. Fans and pundits alike began to question if Liverpool would ever return to the top. They had money problems. No modern infrastructure, no superstars, and no clear future. And the numbers didn't fly. No Champions League qualifications in 5 out of 6 seasons between 2009 and 2015. Finished 8th in 2012, 7th in 2013, 6th in 2015. Conceded 48 goals in the 2014-15 Premier League campaign, their worst defensive record since 1993. Liverpool was collapsing. While Manchester City were becoming a powerhouse under new ownership, and United were still cashing in on their legacy, Liverpool were stuck in a football purgatory. The press was brutal. The Telegraph in 2015. Liverpool's decay has reached crisis level. The club is a museum of former glory. Sky Sports. Pundits mocked their transfers and laughed at their Champions League ambitions. Fans of rival clubs used the word banterside when referring to Anfield. They were being ridiculed. Even some Liverpool fans themselves lost hope. Online forums and fan channels were filled with frustration and despair. "We're not getting back. We're finished," many said. In May 2015, Steven Gerrard plays his final game for Liverpool. It ends in a 6-1 defeat to Stoke City. The man who lifted Istanbul and dragged Liverpool to relevance walked off the pitch for the last time, humiliated, walking alone. The symbolism was painful. The Gerrard era was over, and with it, so was the last connection to Liverpool's golden years. At this point, the general consensus was clear. Liverpool were done. They were a club living off the past, a museum piece, nothing more. Europe had left them behind, financially, tactically, structurally. Even Leicester City was showing more ambition and innovation. Clubs like Dortmund, Napoli, Sevilla, once considered beneath Liverpool, were now ahead of them in results. Imagine telling someone in 2015 that Liverpool would lift the Champions League within 4 years. They'd laugh in your face. The idea that this team could ever dominate Europe again? Delusional. They had no world-class talent, no recent history of success, and no allure to attract stars. And yet, something was brewing behind the scenes. Because in the midst of all this chaos, while the world had turned its back on Liverpool, 3 players were on their way. One from Metz via Southampton, one from Basel via Rome, and one from Hoffenheim. They didn't look like world beaters. They weren't marketable Galacticos. They weren't glamorous names, but they were hungry, explosive, unselfish, and perfect for what was coming. The world had forgotten Liverpool, but these 3 were about to remind everyone what greatness looked like. And it all started with a Senegalese winger with something to prove. Most footballers dream of glory, of lifting trophies, hearing stadiums chant their names, becoming legends. But Sadio Mane didn't dream, he worked. And when no one believed in Liverpool, he was the first to believe. In March 2016, Mané beat Liverpool with 2 goals. And in June 2016, Liverpool spent $34 million to sign this lightning-fast winger from Southampton. The media scoffed. The fee was called excessive for a player like him. But the truth is, Sadio Mané had been fighting for his life since the beginning. He didn't grow up in academies. He didn't wear designer boots as a kid. He played barefoot in the dusty streets of Bamboli, Senegal, hiding his dreams from his family who didn't believe football could feed him. At 15, he ran away from home to chase a dream. At 16, he was rejected at trials for dressing too poor. At 18, he was in Metz, struggling with the language, the weather, and loneliness. But he never stopped running. When Sadio Mané arrived at Anfield, Liverpool were directionless. But from his very first game, things changed. August 14, 2016. Arsenal versus Liverpool. Mané scores a thunderbolt, runs to Klopp, jumps into his arms. A symbolic start to a new era. Final score, 4-3 to Liverpool. Statement made. That season, Mané became Liverpool's Player of the Year. He wasn't just scoring, he was dragging the club forward. His pace tore defenses apart. His pressing set the tone for Klopp's philosophy. His hunger infected the dressing room. He didn't act like a superstar. He washed his own boots, lived humbly, and played like every match was his last. Mané didn't arrive at Liverpool to shine, he arrived to rescue. The football world began to take notice, but Mané wasn't alone for long. In June 2017, Liverpool signed Mohamed Salah from AS Roma for $36.9 million. Again, the critics lined up. Chelsea reject, one-trick pony. Can't cut it in the Premier League. But what followed next was a revolution. Salah's debut season was the stuff of legends. 44 goals in all competitions. Premier League record, 32 goals in 38 games. Broke club records, national records, Champions League records. And at the heart of all this, Firmino. Brought in 2015 by Klopp, he was reconverted by the manager to take a more supportive role. He became a silent artist. He didn't score as much, but made it all possible. False nine, creator, presser, connector. Firmino was the brain, Salah the killer, Mané the spirit. Together they didn't just fit into Klopp's system, they became the system. Before this trio, the team was chaotic, inconsistent, and fragile. But now, with the front three fully assembled, Liverpool became fearless, calculated, and lethal. Their first full season together, 2017-18, Liverpool reached the Champions League final, scoring 47 goals in the tournament. No front three had ever done that before. They ripped through Porto, stunned City, and embarrassed Roma. Mané alone scored in every knockout round leading up to the final. These weren't individuals. They were a synchronized storm. And in the Premier League, they were rewriting what a front three could be. No egos, no drama, just pure performance. Klopp didn't just give them freedom, he gave them purpose. Firmino dropped deep, pulling center backs out of position. Salah and Mané attacked like madmen. Counter-pressing became a religion. If they lost the ball, they won it back within seconds. It was organized anarchy, and Europe couldn't cope. By the end of the 2017-18 season, fans, pundits, and rival managers all said the same thing. This Liverpool front three might be the most dangerous in Europe. 3 men, 3 stories, 1 mission: to bring Liverpool back to life. They changed Liverpool's culture. They started a chain reaction that would wake a sleeping giant. And just as the world started paying attention, the real storm was coming, because now the trio was complete. What happens when 3 completely different players speak the same football language without saying a single word? How do you defend against a team where no one stays in place, but everyone knows exactly where to be? This was the question every manager in Europe was asking in the 2018-2019 season. And the reason? The perfect tactical storm, disguised as a front three. From a tactical standpoint, Klopp's setup was deceptively simple on paper, 4-3-3 formation. But on the pitch, it was chaos, organized chaos. Here's what was really happening. Firmino operated as a false nine. That means instead of staying high like a traditional striker, he dropped into midfield, dragging defenders with him. Salah and Mané weren't wingers in the classic sense. They were inverted forwards, cutting inside constantly into the half spaces, the area between the center back and fullback. Meanwhile, the fullbacks, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson, provided with and bombarded the box with crosses. In other words, the striker became a midfielder, the wingers became strikers, and the defenders became wingers. Sounds confusing? If you're a defender, who do you mark? Salah is wide, then central. Mané drifts inside, then back out. Firmino's not even where a striker should be, he's behind the midfield line. If you follow them, you break your line. If you don't, they punish the space. That's why Klopp's system didn't rely on one player. It relied on interchangeability and intelligence. And the stats proved it. In 2018-19, Liverpool's front three scored 69 goals in all competitions. Firmino 16 goals, 8 assists. Salah 27 goals, 10 assists. Mané 26 goals, 5 assists. All of those with 0 penalties. Every goal was open play or set pieces. No stat padding. From a defensive standpoint, gegenpressing became Liverpool's religion. As soon as Liverpool lost the ball, the front three pressed as a unit, cutting off passing lanes, forcing errors. Firmino often led the press, triggering a cascade of mistakes for the opposing team, allowing the midfield and wingers to jump into action. Mané and Salah would trap the defenders near the touchline like predators. It wasn't just defending, it was psychological warfare. They made teams afraid to have the ball. Even Guardiola said after facing them that they can't breathe against them. You lose the ball and it's a death sentence. Let's pause here. Salah scored the most, Mané was electric, but behind the scenes, there was Firmino, doing everything no one else wanted to do. Link-up play, first line of pressure, defensive positioning, creating space without touching the ball. He was a decoy, a pivot, a magnet for defenders. Firmino didn't just play between the lines, he was the line. In the 2018-19 season, he completed more final third pressures than any other forward in Europe's top 5 leagues. Let's dig deeper. Modern football is about manipulating space and forcing disorganization. Firmino dropping deep disorganizes the defensive line. Salah and Mané attacking the inside channels exploits those gaps. The fullbacks bombing forward pin the opposition wide. Engineered disruption, right? Klopp didn't teach them how to run plays, he taught them how to read the game. That's why they flowed, like water finding the path of least resistance through the cracks. Other top teams relied on rigid structure. City had positional play. Barca relied on ball retention. Bayern on verticality. Liverpool, a perfect balance of structure and raw instinct. Every press was timed. Every run had meaning. Every off-ball movement created opportunity. It wasn't beautiful for beauty's sake. It was beautiful because it broke teams apart. This connection, the silent understanding, couldn't be bought or coached. It was built on chemistry, professionalism, and mutual sacrifice. They didn't just know where each other would be, they knew why. So how do you build the perfect attack? You need talent, you need a system, but most of all, you need trust. And that's what made this front three different. They weren't looking for the spotlight. They were consistently looking for each other. And while the football world watched in awe, the trophies finally started coming. Because in football, it's not just about what you do, it's about when you do it. It should have been the perfect ending to a dream season. The 2017-18 Liverpool team had defied expectations. They didn't just play good football, they completely overwhelmed their opponents. Mané was on fire. Salah was rewriting Premier League history. Firmino was silently dictating the flow of every match. And Klopp had taken a team with no identity and turned it into a European powerhouse. And then, Kiev, the Champions League final. Real Madrid versus Liverpool, Europe's grandest stage. For Liverpool fans, it felt like a return to destiny, a full-circle moment since Istanbul 2005, the chance to replant their flag on top of European football. But football, as always, is cruel. Just 30 minutes in, everything collapsed. Mo Salah, Liverpool's hero, the league's top scorer, the man carrying a nation's hopes, went down in pain after a clash with Sergio Ramos. His shoulder got dislocated, his face said it all. The soul of the team had been ripped out. And then came Karius, a goalkeeper who had shown promise, but who crumbled under pressure. One misplaced throw, one dropped shot. 2 goals gifted to Madrid, 2 daggers to Liverpool's chest. 3-1, final whistle. Madrid lifted the trophy, and Liverpool, broken again. This wasn't just a defeat. It was Liverpool's dream fading away on the world's biggest stage. The headlines the next day weren't about how Liverpool had reached the final. They were about Salah's tears and Karius's collapse. Liverpool scored another defeat under their belt. But this time, something changed. Because for the first time in years, people feared Liverpool again. The pundits who once mocked Klopp's heavy metal football were now calling it revolutionary. Coaches were studying the front three. Fans across Europe were rediscovering respect for the badge. There was pain, but also belief. So what did Liverpool do? They responded, not with words, but with action. The club moved quickly. They signed Brazilian goalkeeper Alisson Becker, breaking the transfer record at the time. He brought calm, confidence, and world-class shot-stopping. They had already brought in Virgil van Dijk in January, the most expensive defender ever at the time. Everyone laughed when he arrived, not knowing he would soon be the foundation of a fortress. But crucially, they didn't touch the front three, because Mané, Salah, and Firmino were the plan. Heading into the 2018-19 season, you could sense their hunger. They were battle-scarred war veterans. They had seen the mountaintop. Now they wanted to own it. From the very start of the season, there was a shift. Liverpool weren't just winning games, they were suffocating teams. They pressed like machines. They attacked with surgical precision. Salah silenced any talk of being a one-season wonder, delivering goal after goal. Mané elevated his finishing and physicality. Firmino, always the connector, played with even more intensity. His work off the ball became essential in unlocking matches. But the defining moment didn't come in the league. It came in the Champions League again. Barcelona, a super team. Messi, Suarez, Coutinho, the man who left Liverpool in search of glory. First leg, Camp Nou. Liverpool played well, created chances, controlled stretches of the match, and yet they lost 3-0. Messi scored a masterpiece free kick. The world watched in awe. And just like that, Liverpool were out. At least, that's what everyone thought. Because what happened next at Anfield defied football logic. May 7, 2019, no Salah, no Firmino, injured, watching from the stands. And still, Liverpool believed. From the opening whistle, the energy was different. Origi scored early, 1-0, still a mountain to climb. Then came Wijnaldum, off the bench, a goal and then another. Within minutes, it was 3-3 on aggregate. Barcelona was stunned. Messi was frozen. Anfield was roaring like thunder. And then, the corner. Alexander-Arnold walks away. Pretends to wait. Spots Origi unmarked. Comes back, fires it in quickly. Origi scores, 4-0. Barcelona didn't know what hit them. Liverpool had pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in football history. No Salah, no Firmino, no problem. Because this wasn't about individuals. This was about spirit, mentality, brotherhood. It was about a front three whose presence, even from the sidelines, inspired belief. 3 weeks later, Liverpool faced Spurs in the Champions League final. A match that, truth be told, wasn't beautiful, but it didn't have to be. Just 2 minutes in, a penalty. Salah, cold, ruthless, 1-0. Late in the game, Origi, again, 2-0. Full time, Liverpool were champions of Europe number 6. But more than that, they were reborn. Mané, Salah, Firmino, no longer seen as surprises, they were now icons. The faces of a new era, proof that loyalty, system, and work ethic could still conquer billions. And Klopp, he simply smiled and said, "I'm so proud of these boys, this is only the beginning." And he was right, because what came next would rewrite the history books. They had conquered Europe. Champions League, done. 6th star on the badge, respect restored, legacy rewritten. But for Liverpool, and for their fans, there was one ghost left to bury: the Premier League. Not since 1990 had they lifted England's top prize. For nearly 3 decades, they had watched bitter rivals like Manchester United, Chelsea, and City dominate the domestic scene. Meanwhile, they waited. Every season began with hope and ended in heartbreak. Until now. The 2019-20 season did not begin with noise. It began with focus. The Champions League triumph had given this team not just belief, but purpose. Mané, Salah, and Firmino had reached a new level of understanding. Their movements felt telepathic. Salah had sharpened his decision-making, less wasteful, more lethal. Mané was in the best form of his life, blending explosiveness and intelligence. And Firmino, pure performance, never needing the spotlight. But what made this team terrifying wasn't just the attack. It was the balance behind them as well. Alisson in goal, calm, commanding. Van Dijk, the wall, one of the most complete defenders the Premier League has ever seen. Trent and Robertson, the flying fullbacks who attacked like wingers and defended like lions. Henderson, Wijnaldum, and Fabinho, relentless in midfield. Engines disguised as footballers. Liverpool weren't just winning, they were dominating. Every opponent, every stadium, every week. By Christmas, they were 13 points clear at the top. And then, they did something only one team in history had done before. They won 26 of their first 27 Premier League matches. The media started to whisper, can they go unbeaten? Fans dreamed not just of a title, but an invincible season. Klopp shut it all down. We are not chasing records, we are chasing wins. Behind the mentality was the front three. No egos, no headlines, just production. And the numbers proved it. Salah, 19 goals, 10 assists. Mané, 18 goals, 7 assists. Firmino, only 9 goals, but countless link-up plays and led all forwards in successful pressures and key passes. But even more impressive, not a single penalty among their top scorers. Just football, pure, open play brilliance. Their pressing was still surgical. Their counterattacks were now deadly. Their transitions faster than ever. Fans began to say it openly. This is the best Liverpool team we've ever seen. And the world agreed. They beat Manchester City 3-1 at Anfield. They thrashed Leicester 4-0 away. They dismantled Spurs, Chelsea, and Arsenal. Not with luck, with power and clarity. But then, the world changed. March 2020. The pandemic, football stopped. For a moment, so did hope. Liverpool were 25 points ahead, but the league was suspended indefinitely. Questions arose. Would the season be voided? Would the title be stripped from them after such a historic run? For fans who had waited 30 years, the idea of having it ripped away felt cruel beyond belief. But when football returned, Liverpool picked up exactly where they left off. On June 25, 2020, Chelsea defeated Manchester City, officially crowning Liverpool as Premier League champions. For the first time in 30 years, the title came home to Anfield. And when that whistle blew, something remarkable happened. Salah didn't scream. Mané didn't cry. Firmino didn't dance. They just smiled, quietly, deeply, like men who had carried the weight of expectation for years and had finally put it down. They were record breakers. Earliest title win in Premier League history, 7 games to spare. Most wins in a season, 32, tied with City. Best home record, 18 wins from 19 games. 99 points, second highest total ever. A 44-game unbeaten run stretching across 2 seasons. And it wasn't just numbers, it was symbolism. They didn't buy a title, they built it. They didn't rely on megastars, they crafted a system. They didn't dominate for 1 month, they redefined consistency. This wasn't just a Premier League win. It was justice, it was resurrection, it was legacy. And just as the celebrations echoed around the empty stadiums, the question slowly began to form. Can they do it again? But football always finds a way to challenge greatness. And for this Liverpool side, the next chapter season wouldn't be as kind. Because one thing is to reach the top. Staying there is a completely different ballgame. Greatness in football is rarely eternal. It burns bright, it scorches everything in its path, but eventually it fades. And for Liverpool, after reaching the mountaintop, the descent began sooner than anyone expected. The 2020-21 season arrived in silence. No roaring Anfield, no fireworks, no parades, just empty seats and echoing whistles. The pandemic had reshaped the world and football with it. But the problems went far beyond closed stadiums. First came the injuries. Virgil van Dijk, the indestructible wall, went down in October after a reckless challenge by Jordan Pickford in the Merseyside Derby. ACL torn, season over. Then Joe Gomez, then Matip, then Henderson was forced to play as a center back. The defense, a fortress just months earlier, had crumbled into chaos. And without that structure, the entire system began to collapse. Remember, Liverpool's pressing game didn't start with the attack, it started with trust. When the backline is stable, the midfield pushes forward. When the midfield presses, the front three can hunt. But now they were chasing shadows. Salah still scored, Mané still ran, Firmino still linked play. But the energy was gone. The confidence eroded. The press wasn't sharp, it was desperate. The passes didn't cut, they floated. The rhythm disjointed, and it showed in the results. Between January and March 2021, Liverpool lost 6 consecutive home games at Anfield. Let that sink in. For almost 4 years, Liverpool had been unbeaten at home. They had turned Anfield into a fortress. Teams used to lose before they even stepped onto the pitch. Now, Burnley, Brighton, Everton all walked out with wins. Something was broken, and it wasn't just physical, it was emotional. But the fans still believed because this was Liverpool. And if there's one thing this club knows, it's how to survive pain. So in the final stretch of the season, despite all odds, they mounted a comeback. With Nat Phillips and Rice Williams in defense, with the midfield reshuffled every week, with barely any consistency, they clawed their way back into the top 4. And in the final game of the season, they secured Champions League qualification. The message was clear. The team was tired. The system had been figured out. Klopp himself said it. We've played the same football for years. We need to reinvent ourselves. In football terms, the cycle was closing. Firmino's numbers had dropped sharply, 9 goals in 2020 and 21, and even fewer contributions the season after. Mané, despite his efforts, looked increasingly isolated, often played deeper or wider just to get a touch. And Salah, while still elite, began showing signs of carrying the burden alone. Whispers started. Should they break up the front 3? Is Firmino finished? Has Mané lost his edge? And by the time the 2021-22 season began, the answer was forming itself. Luis Diaz arrived. Dioda Jota became a regular starter. Firmino was now more of a rotation piece than a starter. And then came the moment that confirmed the inevitable. In June 2022, Sadio Mané announced his departure from Liverpool to Bayern Munich, the end of an era. The man who started the revival was now walking away from it. And make no mistake, this wasn't just a transfer, it was a shift in the soul of the club. The spirit was gone. Firmino stayed another year, Salah renewed his contract, but the trio as we knew it, the fire, the sword, the brain, was no more. From 2017 to 2022, they scored 338 goals together. They broke records, lifted trophies, and resurrected a club that had been sleeping for decades. But time, as always, had caught up. And while the fans remembered the glories, the world moved on. Other teams rose. City strengthened. Real Madrid evolved. Even United began rebuilding. And Liverpool, they stood at a crossroads, because keeping a destiny alive is even harder than building one. And now, with the trio no longer together, Liverpool had to face a daunting question. What do you become when your identity has walked out the door? They didn't come with Ballon d'Ors. They didn't arrive with hype videos or Hollywood smiles. No one called them Galacticos. They were never meant to dominate the world, but they did. Sadio Mané, Mohamed Salah, Roberto Firmino. 3 names that, on their own, meant little to the elite, but together, they became the heartbeat of one of football's greatest revivals. From 2017 to 2022, they weren't just players, they were an idea, a symbol, a statement that football is still a game of spirit, not just spreadsheets. They didn't care who scored. They celebrated each other's goals like their own. They pressed together, defended together, suffered together, and when they triumphed, they did it arm in arm. Fans across the world, whether from Merseyside or Morocco, Senegal or Sao Paulo, felt something every time they took the field. They leave behind more than numbers, more than trophies. They leave behind a memory. The memory of the Barcelona comeback, of Salah's rocket versus Chelsea, of Firmino's no-look goals, of Mané's headers, volleys, and unstoppable grit. And in that memory, they live on, forever in the chants, in the murals, in the dreams of a new generation of Liverpool fans who now know what greatness looks like when it wears red. So when someone asks years from now, who were the best front 3 you ever saw? You won't just say their names, you'll smile, you'll remember, and you'll feel something move in your chest. Because that's what they gave us. Not just football, but meaning. If this story moved you, if you remember those nights, those goals, those moments that made your heart race, then you're one of us. This channel is for you, So hit subscribe, because here we don't just talk football, we tell the stories that football was meant to tell.